Who are the 10 horns Daniel mentions? We'll discuss ideas in this video, and you may be surprised who or what made the list. So let's get started. Before the video begins, please consider downloading the free pre-filled notes guide to follow and fill in as the video plays. It can be downloaded by selecting the link located in the description details of this video. Welcome to the 8th episode of the End Times Study Series. Is this the end? If you have not watched the first 7 episodes, please consider watching those as they provide an overview plus details which complement this video. The goal of this video is to share the importance of Bible prophecy, to encourage others to study Yah's Word, and to be prepared for the end times. Information shared throughout this video contain ideas and perspectives based on my studies and should not be considered 100% accurate. Please study Yah's Word and verify everything you read, hear, and watch, including this video. We're reminded in Isaiah 29 verse 13, Colossians 2 verse 8, and elsewhere not to allow man's doctrine, or our own preconceived biases to supersede Scripture. We should not define the Bible by our lives or views, but rather define our lives and views by the Bible. If this is your first video, you will notice I use various Hebrew names or titles in place of the common English in these videos. I use Elohim for God, Yah or Yahweh for the Lord, Yahshua for Jesus, Messiah for Christ, or Lord, and Ruach for Spirit. I do so, as this is a personal conviction after careful and extensive studying of their names and how they were changed or transliterated. If you have any questions, please see the introduction videos as I share additional details there. Perhaps I'll do a video on this in the future. As a reminder, if you would like to be notified when a new video is posted, please subscribe to the channel and then select the bell notification. Let's continue our study of Daniel 7 now. We covered verses 1 to 12 in the previous 2 videos. Let's briefly recap those, as they set the table for verse 13 and beyond. Verses 1 to 8 began with part 1 of Daniel's vision. The vision was of 4 beasts rising out of the sea, which represented kingdoms. The lion with eagle's wings symbolized Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, which was the same as the head of gold from the statue in chapter 2. The bear symbolized the crushing power of Medo-Persia, which was the same as the chest of silver from the same statue. The leopard symbolized the swiftness of Alexander the Great of Greece, which was represented by the waist and thighs of bronze from Nebuchadnezzar's statue. And the 4th beast symbolized Rome, which was represented by the iron legs and iron mixed with the clay in the feet and toes of the statue. Next, verses 9 to 12 show part 2 of Daniel's dream. In it, Daniel saw thrones in heaven, and the Ancient of Days, with white garments and hair symbolizing purity and perfection. He saw fire, which sometimes represents illumination, purification, or punishment, however here it represented his divinity. Also seen were angels, witnesses, the anti-Messiah, and the rest of the beasts. Set judgment was mentioned, supporting the most likely conclusion of this being the judgment of the beast and beast system, or perhaps the Bema seat judgment, or both. With these details, let's continue our study. Daniel 7 verse 13 says, I saw in the night visions, and behold, with the clouds of heaven there came one like a son of man, and he came to the Ancient of Days, and was presented before him. Daniel sees someone remarkable, described as, one like the Son of Man, presented to the Ancient of Days, and he came with the clouds. This one described as the Son of Man, coming in the clouds, received his final authority and dominion over all things, by the Ancient of Days. This Son of Man is the stone we saw in Daniel 2, which crushes the 4th kingdom, and receives the final kingdom, the kingdom which shall never be destroyed. We see Daniel 2 verse 44 says, And in the days of these kings shall the Elohim of heaven set up a kingdom, which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people, but it shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. Clouds accompanying the Messiah in his return to earth is commonplace in Scripture. Matthew 26 verse 64 says, Yahshua saith unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power, and coming in the clouds of heaven. Matthew 24 verse 30 says, And then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and then shall all the tribes of the earth mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And in Revelation 1 verse 7, it says, Behold, he cometh with clouds, and every eye shall see him, and they also which pierced him, and all kindreds of the earth shall wail because of him. Also, 1 Thessalonians 4 verses 16 to 17 says, For the Messiah himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of Elohim, and the dead in Messiah shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds, to meet the Messiah in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Messiah. We see the full picture of Daniel 7 verses 11 to 13 in Revelation 19 and 20. Revelation 19 verse 11 to Revelation 20 verse 3 says, And I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse, and he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he doth judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire, and on his head were many crowns, and he had a name written, that no man knew, but he himself. And he was clothed with a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of Elohim. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses, clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, that with it he should smite the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron, and he treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty Elohim. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings, and Sovereign of Sovereigns. And I saw an angel standing in the sun, and he cried with a loud voice, saying to all the fowls that fly in the midst of heaven, Come and gather yourselves together unto the supper of the great Elohim, that ye may eat the flesh of kings, and the flesh of captains, and the flesh of mighty men, and the flesh of horses, and of them that sit on them, and the flesh of all men, both free and bond, both small and great. And I saw the beast, and the kings of the earth, and their armies, gathered together to make war against him that sat on the horse, and against his army. And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast, and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into a lake of fire burning with brimstone. And the remnant were slain with the sword of him that sat upon the horse, which sword proceeded out of his mouth, and all the fowls were filled with their flesh. And I saw an angel come down from heaven, having the key of the bottomless pit and a great chain in his hand. And he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil, and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years, and cast him into the bottomless pit, and shut him up, and set a seal upon him, that he should deceive the nations no more, till the 1,000 years should be fulfilled, and after that he must be loosed a little season. Clouds are also representative of how Yahweh presented himself in the Old Testament. Exodus 13 verses 21 to 22 says, And Yahweh went before them by day in a pillar of a cloud, to lead them the way, and by night in a pillar of fire, to give them light, to go by day and night. He took not away the pillar of the cloud by day, nor the pillar of fire by night, from before the people. Leviticus 16 verse 2 says, And Yahweh said unto Moses, Speak unto Aaron thy brother, that he come not at all times into the holy place within the veil before the mercy seat, which is upon the ark, that he die not, for I will appear in the cloud upon the mercy seat. Exodus 19 verse 16 says, And it came to pass on the third day in the morning, that there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud upon the mount, and the voice of the trumpet exceeding loud, so that all the people that was in the camp trembled. Daniel 7 verse 14 says, And to him was given dominion and glory and a kingdom, that all peoples, nations, and languages should serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion, which shall not pass away, and his kingdom one that shall not be destroyed. In verse 14, we see Yahshua is gifted the everlasting worldwide kingdom, and all people, nations, and languages will serve him. We see support of this in Luke 1 verse 33, which says, And he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. And John records in Revelation 11 verse 15, And the seventh angel sounded, and there were great voices in heaven, saying, The kingdoms of this world are become the kingdoms of our sovereign, and of his Messiah, and he shall reign forever and ever. Yahshua is currently seated at the right hand of the Father, awaiting that day when the kingdom will be handed over to him, as seen in Acts 2 verse 33, which says, Therefore being by the right hand of Elohim exalted, and having received of the Father the promise of the Ruach HaKodesh, he hath shed forth this, which ye now see and hear. He is waiting for his enemies to be made his footstool since his ascension, as seen in Acts 2 verses 34 to 35, which says, For David is not ascended into the heavens, but he saith himself, Yahweh said unto my Messiah, Sit thou on my right hand, until I make thy foes thy footstool. And Hebrews 10 verses 12 to 14 says, But this man, after he had offered one sacrifice for sins forever, sat down on the right hand of Elohim, from henceforth expecting till his enemies be made his footstool. For by one offering he hath perfected forever them that are sanctified. Yahshua's earthly kingdom has not yet occurred, but will when he rises from his seat beside the Father, and descends to earth to take the Davidic throne upon earth, as seen in Matthew 25 verse 31, which says, When the Son of Man shall come in his glory, and all the holy angels with him, then shall he sit upon the throne of his glory. And Luke 1 verses 32 to 33 says, He shall be great, and shall be called the Son of the Highest, and Yahweh Elohim shall give unto him the throne of his father David, and he shall reign over the house of Jacob forever, and of his kingdom there shall be no end. We are instructed to pray for his kingdom in Matthew 6 verse 9b to 10, which says, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth, as it is in heaven. Verses 13 and 14 wrap up part 2 of Daniel's vision, which began in verse 9. Verse 15 now begins part 3 of the vision. Daniel 7 verse 15 says, As for me, Daniel, my ruach within me was anxious, and the visions of my head alarmed me. In verse 15, we see Daniel is anxious, or overwhelmed by what he saw in the visions, which unfolds in upcoming verses. Why? Daniel learns that when this little horn arises, he will bring a 3.5 year period of great tribulation. Imagine, Daniel not only sees what this little horn will do to Jews and Gentile saints, but also sees images of the future physical world, unable to comprehend what he is seeing, or how to explain it. This too had to be alarming. Daniel 7 verse 16 says, I approached one of those who stood there and asked him the truth concerning all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of the things. Daniel here in verse 16 approaches one of those, indicating there is more than one being here. These beings are most likely angels, as we'll see later in the interpretation. Back in verses 9 and 10, there were before the Ancient of Days throne, 1,000 thousands that ministered unto him, and 10,000 times 10,000 that stood before him. Perhaps one of those beings from verse 10 were who Daniel asked concerning all this. This being was most likely an angelic being, as we see angels interpreting dreams and visions later in Daniel. Angelic beings explaining visions was somewhat common, as seen in John's account in Revelation 21 verse 9, which says, And there came unto me one of the 7 angels which had the 7 vials full of the 7 last plagues, and talked with me, saying, Come hither, I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. Verse 17 begins the literal interpretation of Daniel's vision. Daniel 7 verse 17 says, These 4 great beasts are 4 kings who shall arise out of the earth. We learn here in verse 17 that the 4 beasts that came out of the sea in verse 3, are 4 kings. Kings have kingdoms, so although not specifically mentioned here, they are implied. We also know from future verses that these are Gentile kingdoms. Verse 17 mentions these kings come out of the earth, which complements the sea mentioned in verse 3, and helps define the kingdoms from the Gentile nations. We also learn that Daniel was living in captivity in Babylon, which was the first beast of his vision. The remaining 3 beasts, however, were future tense, as noted by the words, shall arise, in the verse. Daniel 7 verse 18 says, But the saints of the Most High shall receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, forever and ever. The interpretation is somewhat different than the dream in verse 14, which shared that the Son of Man was given the kingdom. Here in verse 18, we see that the saints of the Most High will receive and possess the kingdom, Yah's kingdom forever. So Yah's saints receive the kingdom with Yahshua. We see confirmation of this in Revelation 5 verse 9b-10, which says, "For thou wast slain, and hast redeemed us to Elohim by thy blood out of every kindred, and tongue, and people, and nation, and hast made us unto our Elohim kings and priests, and we shall reign on the earth." And in Matthew 25 verse 34, we see, "Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, you who are blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world." Daniel 7 verse 19 says, "Then I desired to know the truth about the fourth beast, which was different from all the rest, exceedingly terrifying, with its teeth of iron and claws of bronze, and which devoured and broke in pieces and stamped what was left with its feet." Notice Daniel's lack of interest in the first three beasts, only mentioning that they were different than the fourth. His attention was on the fourth beast, which was different than the first three. Here he adds claws of bronze to the earlier description seen in verse 7, which used such words as terrifying, dreadful, exceedingly strong, devoured, broke in pieces, stamped, and having great iron teeth and 10 horns in explaining this beast. Daniel 7 verse 20 says, "And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions." Here we are given a new detail about the 10 horns. We are told the 10 horns are located on the head of the beast. We are also told the little horn seemed greater than its companions. This implies the little horn grew in power and prestige. What, or who are the 10 horns? For better explanation, we'll need to look to Revelation for additional details. The 10 horns mentioned in chapter 7 are the same as the 10 toes in chapter 2. And both of these are also the beast with 10 horns, wearing 10 crowns in the book of Revelation. Daniel 2 verses 41-43 says, "And as you saw the feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, it shall be a divided kingdom, but some of the firmness of iron shall be in it, just as you saw iron mixed with the soft clay. And as the toes of the feet were partly iron and partly clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly brittle. As you saw the iron mixed with soft clay, so they will mix with one another in marriage, but they will not hold together, just as iron does not mix with clay." Daniel 7 verse 20 says, "And about the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn that came up and before which 3 of them fell, the horn that had eyes and a mouth that spoke great things, and that seemed greater than its companions." Revelation 17 verses 12-14 says, "And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. These have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. These shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them, for he is Lord of lords, and King of kings, and they that are with him are called, and chosen, and faithful." From these 3 sets of verses, we can see from this revived Roman Empire, 10 kings or nations, represented by 10 horns arise. The anti-Messiah, represented by a little horn, rises up from one of these 10, and subdues 3 of the nations, likely because they resist the anti-Messiah and his gain of power. It is believed out of this anti-Messiah's nation, a global system including politics, economics, and an apostate religion arises. He rules, it is believed, for 3.5 years, commonly referred to of the Great Tribulation. John wrote the book of Revelation approximately 700 years after Daniel's record and was living at the peak of the Roman Empire's domination. John, however, prophesied that there would be one more world empire as seen in Revelation 17 verses 10-11, which says, "They are also 7 kings, 5 of whom have fallen, one is, the other has not yet come, and when he does come he must remain only a little while. As for the beast that was and is not, it is an 8th, but it belongs to the 7, and it goes to destruction." Rome revived, is the 7th kingdom which the beast rises out of, as seen in Revelation 13 verse 1, which says, "And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 diadems on its horns and blasphemous names on its heads. This same beast is what the woman, or great prostitute, is sitting on in Revelation 17 verse 3. Revelation 17 verse 3 says, "And he carried me away in the Ruach into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns." One view is the fourth beast is, or comes from Greece. This view derives from the book of Daniel, alluding or referring to the persecution by Antiochus Epiphanes, a Greek king. The primary view, however, which seems substantially stronger, is that Daniel is referring to the revived Roman Empire when speaking of a fourth beast. Where does the phrase, revived Roman Empire, come? While Babylon, Medo-Persia and Greece were conquered, the Western Roman Empire was never actually conquered or defeated. It actually self-imploded, or disintegrated from within due to many factors. This is one reason why it is believed the Roman Empire will be revived, or reborn in the last days. Another reason is because the verse prior to Revelation 17 verses 10 to 11, which we saw a couple minutes back, mentions a seventh kingdom in which the anti-Messiah will come out of. Revelation 17 verse 9 says, "This calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman is seated." What area or city sits on 7 mountains or hills? While there are many cities that claim this, including Jerusalem, Babylon, Moscow, Mecca, and numerous in the United States, Rome is the usual response due to everything else in prophecy that lines up with the Roman Empire. With Rome fitting so well thus far, let's look at some ideas of who, or what the 10 horns could be. The first view is a group of 10 countries that evolved from a large migration of Goths, often labeled barbarians, not considered military in nature, along with other non-Roman groups. These groups had fled from the Huns, who came from the east in 376 AD. These groups sought refuge southward within the Roman Empire. The defenses on the Roman border were no match for these large groups migrating and growing in size within the Roman Empire. Over time, these groups, or barbarian kingdoms, had established their own power in much of the Western Empire area. By 476 AD, these groups had completely overran the Roman Empire, dividing it into 10 parts, which later became the nations of modern Europe. The more common list of 10 which were also mentioned in episode 3 are the Visigoths, which later became Spain; the Anglo-Saxons, which later became England; the Franks, which later became France; the Alemanni, later became Germany; the Burgundians, which later became Switzerland; the Lombards, which later became Italy; the Suevi, which later became Portugal; the Heruli, which were in the areas of Italy, Switzerland, but were rooted up; the Ostrogoths, which were in the areas of Austria, Serbia, Bosnia, etc., but rooted up; the Vandals, which were in North Africa, but rooted up. There is a belief that the bottom 3 didn't agree with the teachings of the Catholic Church or the Bishop of Rome's having full supremacy, and were destroyed by the papacy. One challenge is, according to history, the Herulian kingdom was destroyed by the Lombards at some point between 494 and 508 AD, and the kingdom of the Vandals ended when it surrendered to the Byzantines in 534 AD. Plus, the papacy did not come into its supremacy until 538 AD, after 2 of these 3 no longer existed. Now, while the supremacy of the papacy did not come about until a reported 538 AD, one can find throughout history articles that the papacy may have coerced and/or supported the destruction of 3 kingdoms. Daniel 7 verse 24 says, "As for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings shall arise, and another shall arise after them, he shall be different from the former ones, and shall put down 3 kings." Yet one more challenge with this view is, there were more than just these listed 10 barbarian tribes. This causes confusion on the true identification of the 10 horns out of these barbarian tribes. While I am sure there are other ideas on which of these barbarian tribes fill these 10, I have not found anything substantial. With that being said, let's move on to our second view. Next, let's consider the European Union. What is the European Union, otherwise known as the EU? The European Union, or EU, has become a geopolitical superpower, with 27 member nations currently. There are 10 nations, known as the Western European Union, which have a status as full members, while the remaining 17 only have an associate membership or observer status. The 10 that are known as the Western European Union nations are Belgium, France, Germany, Greece, Italy, Luxembourg, Netherlands, Holland, Portugal, Spain, and United Kingdom. What countries are missing from the original 10 of the Roman Empire? The Ostrogoths, Vandals and Heruli that were listed in the first view. Interesting, when viewing these 27 member nations on a globe or map, they somewhat form the shape of a beast. In addition, there are 10 countries aspiring or negotiating to join the European Union currently. Could the 10 horns in which this little horn arises out of be these 10 Western nations holding full status? Or could the 10 countries aspiring to join the EU be these 10 horns? Only time will tell, however these are only 2 ideas. Let's continue. The EU uses the euro, which came into existence virtually on January 1, 1999. Notes and coins began to circulate in 2002. It took over the former currencies and expanded to the rest of the EU, finalizing in 2009 by the Lisbon Treaty, the Eurogroup, along with the European Central Bank. Revelation 17 verses 3-5 says, "And he carried me away in the Ruach into a wilderness, and I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was full of blasphemous names, and it had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet, and adorned with gold and jewels and pearls, holding in her hand a golden cup full of abominations and the impurities of her sexual immorality. And on her forehead was written a name of mystery, Babylon the Great, mother of prostitutes and of earth's abominations." Where does religion fit into this view of the European Union? We see here an image of a poster issued by the European Union, showing the Tower of Babel, with the slogan, "Many tongues, one voice." Above the Tower of Babel, the Eurostars have been inverted downwards, which are associated with witchcraft and Satanism. Next is an image of the EU Parliament building, again looking like a modern-day Tower of Babel. This building, named the Tower Building, named after the Tower of Babel, is where the 5th Parliament of Europe meets. Interestingly, the legislative amphitheater has 679 seats, each assigned to a particular lawmaker, however one seat remains unallocated and unoccupied. The number of that seat, you guessed it, is 666. It's like they are waiting for the anti-Messiah to arrive and fill his seat. And here is an image of a euro coin depicting a woman riding a beast. A woman riding a beast is a common symbol tied to the European Union. There are stamps, anthems, and flags all revolving around the European Union and containing this religious symbolism. Our third and final view involves the 5 kingdoms that ruled the world prior to the Roman Empire. These 5 were actually ruled by 10 different kingships though. They are the Egyptian kingship, the Assyrian kingship. These 2 had ruled prior to Daniel 2's starting point, which is the Babylonian kingship. Now while the Medo-Persian conquered Babylon, they still had 2 kings, and therefore 2 kingships. The Median kingship and the Persian kingship. Then continuing Nebuchadnezzar's dream, we see the Greek kingship next. When Alexander the Great died at an early age with no heir to the throne, his kingdom was divided into 4 kingdoms or kingships. They were the Macedonian kingship, the Asia Minor kingship, the Seleucid kingship, and the Ptolemaic kingship. Later, the Seleucid kingship conquered the Asia Minor kingship. And Rome came from the west, conquering the 3 existing kingships, Macedonian, Seleucid, and Ptolemaic, and beginning their dominating empire. Many of these kingships that ruled in the past no longer exist, so how will they show up at the end of time as scripture says? While we don't know the personnel that will make up these 10 horns in the end, we can look at where these 10 locations were, prior to Rome ruling, to get an idea. Egypt is still Egypt. Assyria no longer exists, but was originally somewhere around southeast Turkey. Babylon was located in southern Iraq while Media was located in northern Iraq. Persia was located in Iran. Greece is still Greece today. Then there are the four kingdoms divided out of Greece. First, Seleucia, which was located in an area from Turkey to Pakistan, but based in Syria. Then there was Asia Minor, which was the rest of Turkey. Next, was Macedonia, which was in the area of Greece. And finally there was Ptolemaic, which was also located in Egypt. How will Rome return to power if only 3 of the kingships, or horns, were in existence at the time they rose to power the first time? This view looks to Daniel 7 verse 12 to answer that question. Daniel 7 verse 12 says, "As for the rest of the beasts, their dominion was taken away, but their lives were prolonged for a season and a time." In other words, they are lying dormant and will arise in the last days, from within the very territory that was considered the Roman Empire, before its self-destruction. This is confirmed in Revelation 17 verses 12 to 14. Again, Rome was ruling this entire territory in which these kings will arise out of when John wrote Revelation 17 verses 12 to 14, which says, "And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received royal power, but they are to receive authority as kings for 1 hour, together with the beast. These are of one mind, and they hand over their power and authority to the beast. They will make war on the Lamb, and the Lamb will conquer them, for he is sovereign of sovereigns, and King of kings, and those with him are called and chosen and faithful." When looking at a map, we see these 10 kingships are all in the eastern part of Europe and stretch into the Middle East all the way to Pakistan. We can see that these are all located east of Rome. This view is further supported by Revelation 16 verse 12, which says, "The 6th angel poured out his bowl on the great river Euphrates, and its water was dried up, to prepare the way for the kings from the east." The kings of the east here could very well be referring to the 10 horns listed in this third view. This is a good stopping point. We may not know who these 10 are until they arise, however we have some good ideas on where we could be looking. While it is good to study and seek answers such as these, let us not forget that we each must seek Yahshua's saving grace, repent and put 100% trust in him for our salvation, and follow him daily. We know he wins in the end, and we want to be counted worthy and hear him say to us, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Thank you so much for viewing this video. I hope you are enjoying this end-time study. If you recall, Revelation begins and ends with a blessing, so please continue studying. Also, I encourage you to be like the Bereans and verify videos and books you watch and read, including this one, to ensure they line up with Scripture. If you enjoyed the video, please like it. Also, please consider subscribing to the channel. My plan is to post a new video every 2 weeks or so, Yah willing. I am so blessed to be able to study Yah's Word and provide what He has shared with me in my studies. I appreciate you watching and I am so grateful for your prayers and support of this ministry.